Hello everybody, welcome back to Norwich Talk for another transfer video. I thought I'd get back on the bandwagon in terms of transfer videos because they are very interesting to make, and I think everybody's views count in terms of just general opinion on these potential transfers. But the last video I actually made on a transfer was Kieran Dowell and him actually joining Norwich City. Finally a concrete video rather than just speculation, I know. If you could check that out, I'd be very grateful. It's done pretty decent numbers and there's some good engagement as well, some very interesting opinions. A variety of opinions really, which is always interesting for a signing because it usually goes one way or the other, but there are some good opinions and there are some sort of, when I say bad opinions, I mean opinions that suggest he's not a great player, not the actual opinion is bad, on Kieran Dowell, which makes it an interesting signing to me, which, you can argue it excites me more going into the new season. But yeah, as I said, if you could check that video out, I'll be very, very grateful. In today's video, we're going to have a bit of a catch up because between now and that video, there's been some comments from Josip Drmic, Max Aarons, Pukki and Ben Godfrey have all had their names linked with massive clubs in European football, which we'll get onto, because it is really sort of interesting. I say interesting, it's nice to see these players touted with sort of these European giants because it means they're doing something right. From a personal point of view, I know Norwich City are now off the back of a terrible Premier League season, but if you look at these players from an individual sort of growth perspective, they're clearly doing something right, hence these players being linked with European giants that I've got in front of me, teams like Besiktas, AC Milan, Bayern Leverkusen, Bayern Munich. I think they're sort of the main clubs I'll go with for that anyway. And also we'll sign off the video with a little bit of a talk about Ryan Bennett, because literally just before filming this video I saw an article from Connor suggesting that Sky Sports are saying that apparently Norwich are interested in re-signing Ryan Bennett, which I've got a few comments on, as I always do. I'm going to start with Josip Drmic, who actually hasn't been linked with the club or anything, but I put this in this video because it suggests to me that he probably wants to leave Norwich City. There was an article from Connor on the Pink, in which sort of was massively debated, which is fair enough because he said some interesting things in sort of the Norwich City sphere. I've seen some opinions that I agree with, some opinions that I disagree with, so I thought I'd sort of throw mine out there and see what you guys think of it, because it's a very interesting situation. It's probably a situation where we are reading a bit too far into it, but it's the off season. We've got to find something to do with Norwich City, fill that craving or satisfy that craving, however you want to phrase it. Now, as I said, Josip Drmic, he did an interview with Radio SRF, which is a Swiss radio station, and he said some very interesting things. I think the best quotes that I picked out from it were, "But I would like to keep playing at the highest level. I want more adventures. I wanted to play in the best league in the world, and then playing against players like Pogba or Van Dijk was cool. We were always the underdog and sat back most of the time with our parked bus." He literally said parked bus. For a striker, it's the worst. You have little action in front of you, and you can't do what you can do best. Now, they're the quotes that I've picked out as sort of the most prominent in terms of what I look at and sort of feel a little bit uneasy about, and sort of don't really sit brilliantly with me. But, there's plenty more on Connor's article, which I'll leave in the description box down below. Now, Josip Drmic, a very interesting player, one that we've spoken about on sort of both sides of the spectrum in terms of this idea of praise and also sort of a lot of criticism. Now, before lockdown actually happened, I remember having the debate that Josip Drmic could potentially be a suitable number 2 to Teemu Pukki, and since the restart, much like every single Norwich player, he was diabolical. Now, I do admit I probably have used him as a bit of a scapegoat because you sort of look to do that. I think it's human instinct to sort of look for a reason for the action of something, and I think Josip Drmic has been scapegoated because there's sort of this preconception that maybe he's a bit arrogant because he has his music, etc. And these comments don't really support it. Describing Daniel Farke's football as park the bus won't sit well with Daniel Farke. We know he doesn't like his methods criticised, especially by his own players, which to me, calling it park the bus is criticising. But yeah, I just don't think it's worked for him this season. I think he's a player who, like Teemu Pukki, came to Norwich City on a free. This idea that Norwich City was a chance for him to rebuild his career, and it's gone the other way to Teemu Pukki. Now, I don't think Josip Drmic has been a complete disaster, but he's not scored 30 goals, so that's where this idea of him not following Teemu Pukki's footsteps come from. I'm sure we can all agree. Now, there really isn't too much to add to the Josip Drmic debate because quite a lot has been said. I think all the ground has really been covered, but the last thing that I do actually want to say is I think he'll probably leave Norwich City because I think he wants to be the main man. Now, for me, next season, he won't be the main man because you look at Teemu Pukki, who I think is going to stay. We'll get onto that in this video. And Adam Eder, and this idea that I think he'll be quite important for Norwich City next season because we know Daniel Farke loves the youth players. And I just don't think that allows Josip Drmic any room to sort of be Daniel Farke's main man, which is probably leading to his frustration. You know, he says that he wasn't able to do what he wanted to do, which is score goals, which is fair enough, I suppose. He scored a few this season. He obviously scored against Spurs in the Cup. That's probably his most memorable goal. But I just don't think that he wants to be here because my general conclusion from all of this debate about Josip Drmic is that happy players don't speculate their own future. You take the Max Aarons approach, which is you say, right, I've got a contract here, I'm going to kick on. And if you leave, it's like, fair enough, okay, off you go, rather than Josip Drmic sort of criticising the way Daniel Farke plays football. But yeah, that's probably everything for me on Josip Drmic. I just sort of wanted to mention that because they're my sort of final thoughts that hopefully won't change. I mean, you know, football's a very fluid game in terms of opinions, but at the same time, I think that's probably my final thoughts on Josip Drmic. Now, on to the more interesting ones and probably ones that make us maybe a little bit sadder in terms of the idea that Max Aarons has recently been linked to Bayern Munich. Now, I really don't have much to say about this. I don't think it's going to happen because it doesn't really make sense unless maybe Bayern Munich are looking to loan Max Aarons back to Norwich. But for me, I don't think it really makes sense. You look at them already, they've got players like Benjamin Pavard, a World Cup winner, Joshua Kimmich as well. But yeah, I just don't see this one happening. Max Aarons, for him, it'd be a brilliant move. You look at players like Jadon Sancho, and recently I think it's Jude Bellingham going to Dortmund, another a giant in Germany and developing their game really, really well. We know Germany develops good players, and now there is a little bit of a trend of English players going over there and coming back, or maybe not coming back, but developing into world beats, if I can get my words out properly. But I just don't see this one happening. But yeah, my views on Max Aarons and Bayern Munich are short and sweet. I don't think it'll happen. You know, if it is true, I don't think Norwich City would stand in the way of Max Aarons unless the price isn't right, and we're seeing £20 million touted, which might be about right. I'd probably knock it up to 25, maybe even 30, but I think in terms of this idea of if he was to leave Norwich City to go to Bayern Munich, it would be for the right price because, as Stuart Webber said, Norwich are in no position where they have to sell. The club's in the healthiest state it's been in since he arrived, which is quite exciting in terms of actually bringing players into the club. But yeah, they're my thoughts on Max Aarons. Now, we'll move on to Ben Godfrey, another young player for Norwich City. He's had his name touted all over the place, the latest club being AC Milan. Again, it's very interesting, Ben Godfrey is a player who, for me, is probably Norwich's prize asset. I might have said different on another video, but right now I'm thinking Ben Godfrey probably is because he has the assets to be, as Hodgie says on this channel, he has the attributes to be a Champions League quality defender. He's quick, he's strong, he's really good in the air, he's pretty good with the ball at his feet, and he's very, very young. He's got a lot to learn. We know this this season. He was very over-relied upon this season, and he couldn't really sort of form a partnership because of injuries with Norwich City in terms of this idea of him forming a solid partnership with a fellow centre-back, whether that's Christoph Zimmermann, Tim Close, or Grant Hanley. They all kept getting injured, so there was a lot of uncertainty, and the team just generally wasn't very stable along the back line, because of the injuries, like I mentioned. Now, again, much like Max Aarons, I don't think Norwich City would stand in the way of Ben Godfrey leaving because I think every single player in this team is replaceable. Every single player in football is replaceable. It's just about going out there and sort of replacing them, which is the tough part. But we've seen before that Stuart Webber is capable of replacing players. You look at James Maddison when he left. I think Norwich fans were thinking, right, this could be it. But then Marco Stiepermann came in and had an absolute world beater of a season, and arguably could have done it this season, but he didn't. But the idea of replacing an important player, it's not impossible. It's been done before at Norwich City, and I think Norwich City would move out of the way of Ben Godfrey if he wanted to leave. But yeah, it's just like Max Aarons. I think these players are worthy of the moves. I think they are good enough to go and play for these big teams because individually they've developed pretty well. Maybe they've harshed their price or damaged their price a little bit because of especially post-Project Restart, I should say, rather than in general, because of sort of the disastrous finish and this idea that they are actually part of the defence who conceded the most goals in the Premier League this season. But yeah, I think they are sort of worthy of a move in terms of individuals. Although football's not an individual game, is it? Football's a team sport. But, they're my thoughts on them two players. It's frustrating because there's not too much to say about it, other than the fact that I don't think it'll happen, because I think they'll want to stay in England and develop their game here. I think at this point in their lives, maybe it's a little bit easier. They're only a couple of years older than me, and, maybe my lifestyle's a little bit different to theirs. But I think right now I'd probably want to stay in my home country where everything for you is sort of a lot easier. You've then not got to worry about living in a foreign country, learning a new language, etc. I think these play massive factors in terms of whether younger players especially want to go abroad. It's the same for players who are abroad and come here. The shifting culture, language, and sort of just general lifestyle is a massive thing, and I think perhaps maybe that would be a pull factor in terms of keeping Ben Godfrey and Max Aarons here at Norwich City. And then my thoughts on the two Norwich City youngsters. Now we'll move on to Teemu Pukki, who has caused quite a bit of debate. He has been linked with Besiktas. There's actually a post on Instagram which has 36,000 comments as of yesterday when I looked at it, of just saying come to Besiktas. So fair play to the Besiktas fans, that is admirable. But who knows how much of an impact that will have on if Teemu Pukki wants to leave Norwich City or not. I thought it was just quite mesmerising and fairly interesting, and shows how important football is to that football club. And that country specifically, they often have like flares and stuff, and you can see how passionate the fans are. Passionate will be the adjective I use to describe them actions. Maybe a little bit insane, maybe a little bit crazy, but everyone needs a little bit of crazy in their lives, don't they? But yeah, Teemu Pukki, Norwich don't need to cash in for me. I've seen this sort of argument that Teemu Pukki's finished. I don't think he is at all. It's quite a lazy argument for me, to be honest with you, because by that logic, every single Norwich City player who's played post-Project Restart should be sold, because they've not been very good. Now, I know Teemu Pukki's form has been dry since January, but I think every single Norwich City players have. I know as well that the Finnish national manager said that he should go and leave and go to a higher level club than Norwich City, but I just sort of ignore them because he benefited from Teemu Pukki playing in the Championship before in terms of his 29 goal season and Finland. So I just sort of ignore him. I think it's such an easy thing for him to say. There's no potential sort of repercussions from him saying that, really, is there? I think it's just sort of natural. You want the players, in terms of an international manager that is, you want the players you're managing to be playing at the highest level possible, to increase development, encourage development, however you want to phrase it. But yeah, for me, Teemu Pukki doesn't need to go anywhere. Do I think he'll hit the ground running next season? I don't know. It is sort of up in the air at the moment. Teemu Pukki, towards the end of the season, I say towards the end of the season, for the last sort of 6 months really, has looked not the same player. But for me, that's a confidence thing. I don't think it's his general ability. I think it is just his confidence. But as I said a minute ago, it's the same for every single Norwich City player at the moment. The confidence is low. Now, it is then Daniel Farke's job next season to sort of turn the tide and shift the dressing room atmosphere, which might be a little bit low in terms of just a lack of confidence, because Norwich City have been humiliated post-Project Restart a couple of times, and as I said, that's Daniel Farke's job, and we've seen before that this Norwich City team are mentally strong. I do think it is just a case of Teemu Pukki grabbing a few goals when we're back in the Championship. Now, we know he's going to have a lot of chances in the Championship for him to score. You look at the 18-19 season, he could have had 60 goals, but at the same time, the Championship's a lot easier than the Premier League because you have more chances to score from. You look at games this season, he had 2 against Wolves, 2 against Aston Villa, which he should have scored. Whereas maybe in the Championship, you're playing against the Wickham, let's say, you'll probably get 4 or 5 more chances to actually score from. And we know that he will find the goal, because let's not forget, the guy hit double figures for this season as well. I don't think we should automatically forget the first few months of his Premier League season. As I said, again, it's like Norwich City. They were really good for the first few months of this Premier League season. They were sort of almost scoring goals for fun. I don't want to throw that term out there, but they were playing really good football, creating a lot of chances. And yeah, for me, it's just as simple as that with Teemu Pukki. It's just a level of confidence. Now, I understand why fans aren't feeling, or some fans aren't feeling as confident because of what we've seen since the restart and sort of for the last few months with Teemu Pukki. But also at the same time, I sit on the other side of the fence in terms of this idea that Teemu Pukki will get firing again. Will he hit 30 goals again? Maybe not, but you look at the emergence of a player like Adam Ida, potentially Josip Drmic if he fancies staying. If Norwich bring another striker in, you then look at this idea that he won't be as relied upon as he was last season. If you look at the Championship winning season, we had Jordan Rhodes to sort of caveat when Pukki wasn't enough on the pitch, and obviously Rhodes popped up with a few important goals. But yeah, for me, Pukki's not finished at all. He's got a lot to prove, and I don't think that once the going gets tough, you can't just get going. It's not as simple as that. But, not only that, I think Teemu Pukki will want to stay. You see a lot of Norwich City legends, Dean Ashton, Ewan Roberts, Darren Huckabee, off the top of my head, John Ruddy as well. I think Ryan Bennett as well. I think he still has a house here in Norfolk, from what I read in that article. These players like to stay and live in Norwich, so potentially you could be looking at Pukki. Now he's getting on a bit. I think he's 29 or 30. As a player who might potentially want to live here. Wes Houlihan as well. I think he's still in Norfolk. And I think that'll be a pull factor for him to stay at Norwich City because his attitude's good. There's absolutely no question that his attitude is good. Well, from what we know and what we've seen anyway. Now, we're going to finish on a very interesting rumour, which is that Norwich City are apparently interested in Ryan Bennett. Do I think we'll sign Ryan Bennett? No, I really don't. He's 30 years old. I think it wouldn't really fit Norwich's transfer methods. I'd argue it'd be a decent signing because he's obviously massively improved since he left Norwich City. He had a big part in Wolves' promotion campaign. He's played in the Premier League. He's done fairly well. I actually spoke to a Wolves fan, Harry Mansell, on this channel before, and I think he said he had a bit of a falling out with Nuno. He spent the last bit of this season on loan at Leicester. He obviously got turned inside and out by Harry Kane, but at the same time, who hasn't been at some point in their career? But I think he would be a decent option for Norwich. But equally, I think Stuart Webber might look at that signing or that rumour, and think, nah, not for me, because let's not forget he actually released him from Norwich City because he wasn't good enough. His wages were too high. Now, if he wants to take a massive wage cut, sure, we'll take him because I don't think his fee would be very, very high. And as I mentioned earlier in Connor's article, it said that he has a house in Norfolk, so that could be a pull factor in terms of bringing him back to Norfolk. But yeah, I don't think he'd fit the bill at Norwich in terms of this idea of youth and this common theme that Norwich City like to sign young players. I remember sort of being flabbergasted that Norwich City had signed Lucas Rupp because he was 29, and that's not really a Stuart Webber type of signing from what we've seen in the past. I think Ryan Bennett is a bit like that. I think something to caveat that as well is also the fact that he's homegrown, so maybe that could be a reason that Norwich City might potentially want to sign him. I don't think we will. I don't think it's the worst thing in the world if we don't. But equally, he's massively improved since leaving Norwich, so I think that just about sums up my thoughts on Ryan Bennett. They're short and sweet because I sort of looked at that and I refuse to think about it any more than what I have done because I just don't see it happening. I think there are options and sort of players in foreign leagues that Stuart Webber and Daniel Farke will want to bring in, younger players at the very least as well. But yeah, they're my thoughts on everything sort of regarding Norwich City and transfers at the moment. Anything that I've chatted about or spoken about in this video, I'd be keen to know your thoughts on down in the comments below. There's a couple of reviews coming out over this week as well, and there's existing ones at the moment also. Don't forget that. So until next time, we'll see you again very, very soon.